Well, good afternoon, everybody, NBC Church family and social media world via the interwebs and Facebook. And we're so glad that you're with us today for our conversation we have every Monday around this time that we call the weekly. Today is April 25th, 2022. We are coming to the end of April. This is our last one for the month of April. And we are enjoying some spring-like weather. The flowers are blossoming, the grass is growing. Certainly the warmth in the air is telling us that hope is coming and summer is around the corner. So we're
Hope is
excited
here,
about
man. Hope
that.
is here.
Hope is
Also,
here.
also the allergens are in the air, so hopefully you're taking your Zyrtec or Claritin or whatever it is that you take.
Yes, yes. For many of us who may need that, it's that time of year as well. So good to be with you and start new things, including, not the least of which, is a brand new sermon series here at NBC that we are walking through expositionally a book of the Bible, a letter of the New Testament written by the Apostle Paul to the church at Corinth, one among many letters that he wrote to the church at Corinth, two of which have been preserved for us. And so we're going to be thinking about the topic of toxicity and how we can not be part of the problem, but be part of the solution and
Yeah.
detox. And so Pastor Bob kicked us off yesterday. Tell us a little bit about your heart here behind the series. What were you hoping to accomplish? How were you hoping to do your work as a pastor, teacher, and equip the saints for the work of the ministry by covering this topic at this time during this cultural moment? Tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I think we had been having discussions back and forth on doing a series that dealt with some relational issues that people were going through, and even some hot button topics that were in that people are talking about in the culture. And as we were praying and thinking about that, I was kind of tasked with putting together the outline for this, and we landed on First Corinthians as being a good backdrop, particularly because we're living through a lot of stuff right now, and I think, as I said in the message, I think a lot of people have had these complex issues thrown at them, and we don't know how to discern or think through them biblically, because it's not like you can just get a proof text and say, well, there's the answer, the Bible says so. And yes, the Bible does speak to these issues, but maybe not in as simple and clear a way as we want. Although Paul definitely in the letter, as you mentioned, there's a number of letters that were written to Corinthians. He had correspondence back and forth. Most commentators think that he's writing the First Corinthians in response to a letter he got from the church saying, hey, we got some issues going on. And he kind of lays it out here. So I think the heart behind the series is just really the same thing that is on Paul's heart, is that as a pastor, as a teacher, as a leader, we want to help equip the saints to be unified and point people to the gospel, even when there's issues that we don't totally agree about, and issues that can lead relationships to be very toxic, as you mentioned. So hopefully the message yesterday kind of outlined that and laid the foundation for where we're going to go over the next couple months. We're going to cover the book itself in 8 weeks, and we're going to have some breakouts for Mother's Day and Father's Day. But we're going to cover those major chunks of the book over the next couple months. So that's kind of the general gist of it. We can get into the nitty gritty details if you want, but that's the big overview.
Well,
maybe
I got to just interrupt you here because this was an interesting little happening yesterday in our church. For those of you who may not have been there or missed this Sunday, there was a little situation where the pastor came in from the back door wearing a certain contraption on his face. What was going on here, Bob? What are you wearing there? What are you trying to communicate?
Well, I think, periodically, and I like to come up with like images that will stick in people's minds as it relates to the topic of the sermon series. And so when I think about the toxic nature of the culture, all I can think about is just wearing a gas mask. And, we opened up by talking about chemical weapons and the need to wear masks when those things happen to protect yourself. And we talked a little bit about what I was calling cultural chemical weapons that are in the culture now. And I think for a lot of people, it feels like I'd like to walk around like this Like I can't even engage a topic because it's gonna suck the life out of me. And all we need to do is have a mask on. So that was an image, hopefully that will stick with you as it relates to as it relates to the topic of toxicity, and hopefully we're moving into the detoxicity aspect of it. Hey, if
Well
you
done. Your pastor
yeah,
works hard for you, friends. It's not easy in that hot mask preaching a sermon. So thanks for giving us a
it
memorable
was
way
a little
to
it
think
was a
about
little
that.
bit confining. I will say that I can only
Confining,
keep it on for so long.
I'll say. Well, that was a neat image and a good cultural, touch point. I love the way you really connected the issues with this book that was written almost 2,000 years ago with the issues that we're wrestling with today. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well done. You had three main points in your message, and the first one was about the problem. You already mentioned, that global pop
Yeah.
quiz that we've been taking. What else would you add to that first movement? What were you trying to communicate about the problem that we are currently
Yeah.
sitting in and addressing today?
Yeah, I think there's some messages that just work really good with that problem solution, kind of motif. And certainly I think Corinthians itself follows that. And then, the third point is kind of the ongoing nature of how this is not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing battle that we face. And I think Paul makes that pretty clear in the first two. So let me just put up the outline slide that I made for the book, which I found to be pretty interestingly helpful for me. Oh, can you let me share the screen, Dave?
Oh, sorry about
I gave
that.
you rights, and you've not restored my rights. I'm unrighted right now.
It's a toxic way to do a Zoom call. Here you go, man. It's all yours.
All right. So this was the slide that I put together that kind of outlined the Corinthian problems. And, later on, we talked about how Paul starts with the cross and the power of the cross in chapter 1, and then he bookends that with the hope of the resurrection at the end. And in between are all these issues that the Corinthian church, like a lot of issues they're dealing with. I sort of combined a couple things together to make it make sense. But this is the general gist. These kind of 5 categories I thought were pretty helpful. Factions and divisions, that was pretty obvious, the cult of personality today, but that's really relevant because how many people are going to churches or leaving churches because of, a kind of a tribal mindset that's out there within the culture. And the reality, as we said, is that in Corinth, in the Corinthian church, many of the problems were imported from the Corinthian culture that was there. And I was pretty fascinated to see how that played itself out as I was researching the book this week and the previous weeks. Sexuality was a big one. I think you're covering those chapters. We didn't dump that on Pastor Day, but it just happened so that you're going to be doing those. There was power dynamics between rich and poor, idolatry, which is always an issue. I'm going to cover that one. And then the spiritual arrogance, the spiritual gifts, kind of the sections of Corinthians I think that it's most known for is chapter 12 to 14, where it talks about the supernatural spiritual gifts and prophecy and how the church should service should run, which is a sandwich around the very famous 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, where Paul tells us, hey, you can have all these gifts, but if you don't have love, if your character doesn't match up with your giftedness, it doesn't matter. You're not living in response to the gospel. So all of this is really, he's laying out these problems, which again I think are culturally transferable, but the bottom line is that it is the gospel that cleanses. It's the gospel that should inform. All of that is what is woven throughout the entire letter, and I think is a good word for us in our everyday lives, even today in 2022.
So how long did it take you to make this chart, man? This is pretty fancy.
I don't think it took me terribly long, but I was a little behind this week, and I got to the end of the PowerPoint. And I'm like, oh, I didn't want to make this slide. So it did. I don't know. It took me 20 minutes. It's just basically text boxes and that, but I had thought about it ahead of time. And hopefully it's a good visual for people to kind of see how the issues arose.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Really helpful. So that's the problem. And then you didn't say find the solution. You didn't say know the
Yeah.
solution. You didn't
Yeah.
say implement the solution, execute the solution. Instead, you said become the solution. Now, why would you use that language? And what did you mean by all that?
Yeah, I think for me, and probably for a lot of other people out there too, there's an element where if I know the answer, I can just say, "Hey, I know it. I know that's what I should. I know that's what I should do." The hard thing is actually doing what you know is right, and that's what I think Paul is getting at here is that you shouldn't just know what's right. You actually need to live out what's right. Live that out because these Corinthians who were super spiritually gifted and all this, like their lives weren't matching up with the gospel that they heard, and that's what Paul is writing to them about. And so, verse 18, which I'll share again here. This was kind of the key verse that we were looking at. For the word of the cross, that is the message of the cross, is folly to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. And there's three elements to that verse. There's the message of the cross, which we talked about, that the message of the cross, what Christ went through, his example for us is what should dominate not just our belief, our doctrine. Of course, it is important for doctrine, but doctrine shouldn't be separated from how we live. Right? How do people put it? There's right orthodoxy, and then there's orthopraxy. Right? You need to be living in response to the message that you believe. And then he sets up this contrast between those that aren't Christians. They look at the message of the cross of what Christ went through and think it's folly. It's a ridiculous thought, literally is the translation. And I do believe the Greek word was moria, which is I think where we get our English word moron from. They would say if you believe that message, you're a moron. Sorry if that's harsh language, but that's kind of where the word comes from. And then secondly, he says if you're a Christian, the message of the cross is the power of God. It's the dunamis. And so we talked about what it means to be dynamite. And so becoming this message requires us to live it out, to have conversations. And we talked about two things from this verse. We talked about exposing the folly of the world system, so showing that they think the message of the cross is ridiculous, but in reality, it's their thought that's not wise. They're the ones that are missing the point. And so out of love, we should be engaging with people that don't believe, to show them the folly of their ways. We need to become dynamite, which is the power, that word for power, and requires us to go in and expose the folly of the world system. And all of that should be done, as Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians, out of love, out of a heart for people. And that should be something that we live every single day. And we should do it with humility. And that's where Paul goes in verse 26. He tells us to remember where we came from. Remember where we came from. Don't think of yourselves more highly than you ought, right? And when you're engaging people with love and humility and responding to the message of the cross, that's when there's real change. Transformed hearts are what bring DeToxicity to the world. So that's what we kind of unpacked. We gave some other examples of things, but it's not just about knowing the solution. You actually have to live it out too.
That's awesome. So good word. Anything else you wanted to share about that as we kick off the series, or what's coming next, or anything else on your heart?
I would just say, I think the challenge for us really, you hear a message like this, and I think there's some messages where people just intuitively know, yeah, this is right. This is what's going on right now in my life. I think people are living 1 Corinthians right now in America and probably in our church. The question is, and this was the challenge we mentioned at the end, is that so often when it comes to relationships or cultural moments or institutions, we're looking around and saying it's everybody else in the culture that's causing the problems but me. And I think you used this quote, this famous quote in the Easter message the week before from G.K. Chesterton, where he said, "What's wrong with the world? I am." Right. And even if there are toxic people around you, it should always start with us examining our own hearts. And so the closing challenge was, how do I become the antioxidant in this toxic world? How do I bring detoxicity to the spheres of influence that I have, and focus very much on that. So I would just challenge everybody as we continue to go through the series to really be asking this question week after week, and we're going to be applying it to these different areas. So, we talked about just the general toxic culture in the first week. This coming week, I'm going to be talking out of 1 Corinthians 3 and 4 about just toxic leaders. And that's not just, even though I think in 1 Corinthians, Paul's talking about himself and Apollos and the apostles, but there is a broad leadership category that goes into a lot of different areas. So all of us are leaders in some sphere. You could be a leader in the church. You could be a leader in your family. You could be a leader at your job in some way, shape, or form in a relationship. You could be leadership spans a wide range. And so what does it mean to be a leader who brings DeToxicity, who brings health to a relationship and to an organization? And that's what we're going to talk about this coming week. Maybe focusing a little bit on narcissism. That's been a big discussion in the church and culture recently. And then you're talking about toxic communities. That's chapter 5. Some interesting things happening there. How do we bring DeToxicity just to our general communities, both the church and those that are around us? You're covering the toxic romance piece, chapter 7. Toxic disagreements, which is kind of that idolatry thing. They were arguing back and forth about the food sacrifice to idols. Rob Mittuck's coming to talk about toxic worship in chapter 11. You're covering the spiritual gifts one, week 7, toxic spirituality. And then Clint Watkins, another one of our war partners, is gonna talk about the total detox, focusing on the hope of the resurrection, which really is kind of the highlight, really a big highlight of the letter that then Paul uses to go back and show how it applies to all the other issues that we're talking about, right? The resurrection is key. If you don't believe the resurrection, you're to be pitied, right? That's the centerpiece of our faith. So that's where we're going. Looking forward to being with everybody over the next few months, and I hope it continues to be an edifying series.
Awesome. Well, the best is yet to come. What else is going on in the life of our church right now, Pastor Bob? What's something that we can highlight that's coming up soon?
Well, we mentioned a couple things in the last few weeks. Exciting things that are coming up. First, we are doing something called Charter Day, which is happening on May 21st, and that's a big street fair in the center of Basking Ridge, where we're located, celebrating the the founding of the town. I think we have a section of the website that's dedicated to that. I think Mark put that up. So check that out. We'd love to have people come out and serve and just connect with people from the community and let them know that we're here and that we love them. And then the other thing is on May 7th, Mother's Day weekend, we are hosting a parents' night out. I'm trying to get to the website where it says that. Yeah, parents' night out. So if you're somebody who needs a date night, you just want to break and want to drop your kids off, come and check out the parents' night out. We'll give you some free childcare for a couple hours so you can get out of the house, and we just want to serve you in that way. So mark your calendars for that. It's gonna be a lot of fun. If you have any questions, you can contact Rachel.
Awesome. I did find the Charter Day page, May 21st there, and Parents Night Out. We'd love to serve you and bless you. And what a great weekend to treat mom to a date night. So we look forward to that. And stick with us. If you guys need us, contact us. We're here for you. And we look forward to being together Thursday night for Thursday night prayer this week. So we will pray together later on online.
There you go.
Till then, God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Great week.